Jain everyone, and welcome to Cambridge University Jain Society's second event for this term in collaboration with Imperial Jain Society. Today we're really excited to welcome Anish Visaria, who will be talking to us about a new search engine for Jain literature that he has created, Jain Quantum. He is a recent graduate from Georgia Tech and he's from Boston, USA. We're really excited to see how this new generation of Jains are making the Jain religion digital and making it more accessible to everyone. So yeah, a warm welcome to Anish. Thank you so much for talking to us. And I'll quickly pass over to Jinal from Imperial Society to give a quick introduction as well.
Jain and everyone, I hope you're all keeping safe and well. Firstly, on behalf of Imperial College's Jain Society, I would like to say Jain to everyone and welcome you to our first ever collab event with Cambridge. Just before we start, could we all make sure that our microphones are muted? And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself at the end for the Q&A. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Anish. Thank you.
Thank you. Jai Jinendra and Pranam, everyone. My name is Anish Visaria, and I'm the director of innovation at Jain Library, which some of you may know is it's a large collection of books online for Jainism. So I just have a short presentation that I want to do about Jain Quantum, which is a new search engine that I was involved in making for Jain Library. And I'm just gonna go through it. And if you have any questions at the end, then I can take them at that point. Can all of you guys hear me, by the way?
We're getting a weird echo. I'm not sure if it's from your side or I think you might have.
Yeah, I'm getting a bit of an echo too as well. I'm not sure though.
Okay. If it gets too bothersome, then I can move to a different location.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Okay, so Jain Quantum, as some of you may know, is a Jain literature search engine. So today I'm going to be talking about just like an introduction to Jainism and Jain literature, and how I went about making Jain Quantum, and lastly some goals and visions I have for the project. So just a quick disclaimer, I'm not a Jain scholar. So if anything in this talk has offended you or gone against the teachings of Bhagwan Mahavir, we sincerely ask for forgiveness and Michami Dukkadam. So I'm just gonna start out by saying what is Jainism? So I think there's many different ways to put it, but one of the best ways I've seen that people put Jainism is essentially a modern word for the ancient path of nonviolence. And I think that's very encompassing of everything. And as Jainism is also not just a religion, but it's like a way of life. So just by saying it's just a path of nonviolence, it's very inclusive. And I think that's one of the best ways and the simplest ways to put it for everyone to understand. So, the biggest section of Jain literature and the most important is the Jain Agams. So the Jain Agams are the main texts of Jainism passed down by the Gandhars, who are the disciples of Mahavir, who is the 24th Tirthankar. And one way, I might as well just showcase Jain Quantum here. So I just found this book which has a list of Jain Agams. There's 45 in total. Different sects such as Digambar and Shwetambar will respect different Agams, but in general, there's generally 45 that people recognize. So the first section, we have the Anga Agams. There's 11 of them. some of them you might recognize, such as the Acharang Sutra, and then you might also have heard about Uttaradhyan Sutra, and there's so many other agams, which we definitely don't have the time to go to, and I don't know too much about them either, because they're generally mostly meant for monks and sadhus to study, but the common lay people can read the annotations, which is where Jain Quantum comes in, and Jaini Library. So yeah, there's 45 in total, and so some other important Jain texts that are very recognized and important and prominent is the Tattvartha Sutra. So the Tattvartha Sutra is this very special text written by Umaswamy around 100 AD. And it's special in the way that it's actually recognized equally as important by Digambar and Shwetambar sects. So that's it's a very authentic, and people regard it as probably one of the most authentic books of Jainism. Additionally, we have the Trishashti Shilaka Purusha Charitra, which is the 63 great personalities of this time cycle, or of this half time cycle. So some examples are many of you know them. They include the 24 Tirthankars. They also include Krishna, Ram, and many other figures that you may have that are just generally very prominent in like Indian culture. Then we have Panchastikai, Samesar, Niyamsar, which is all text by Kunda Acharya, who's a Digambar monk. And Kunda Acharya was actually a cow herder before he became an Acharya. And there's some very interesting facts about Kunda Acharya, such as there's a story about him actually walking on air, which is a sort of a mystical story. But I won't go too much into that. But you can read about it. So why Jain Quantum? So why do we even need a Jain literature search engine? Why can't people just go and read the books and then make an opinion, or get knowledge from that path? I feel that the user experience is not good enough for the average people to read text in that way. I feel like we have enough technology now in this day and age that we should be able to provide a better user experience for people. And one of the best ways to do that is a search engine. So so the first thing was the user experience. We definitely need to change that, because the Jaini Library website also provides the books as a catalog. But we needed more functionality in terms of people can actually search within the book and find the exact page where they find the information that they want. Another portion that goes hand in hand with that is accessibility. So it's very intimidating for the average person to go read Jain texts or any religious text, actually. So one of the best ways to make it accessible is to put it in a searchable format where people can find anything they want, and also provide a browsing, like a catalog. And I feel that we were trying to accomplish that with Jain Quantum, and we're still working on it. Of course, all of this is an ongoing process. And then finally, the third thing that third inspiration for this project was the authenticity. And what I mean by that is that, let's say someone says something about Jainism. or let's say someone says something about any religion actually. In this day and age, we need some way to quickly verify it and also understand it and learn more about it. So there's no better way to do that by going directly to the source, right? You want to always go directly to the source. Imagine if everyone learned everything directly from the source, exactly where it came from. Everyone would have a much better view and a better foundation of knowledge if they did that. So a Jain literature search engine would allow you to do that because it allows you to find more material within authentic books that you normally would not be able to find. It's very difficult for you to sift through thousands and thousands of pages of Jain text, and not all the knowledge is actually in English. Many of it is in Devanagari, Sanskrit, Prakrit, all types of languages that most people are not familiar with. So these were the three inspirations for why I created this. So I'm just gonna go through the process of how this even came to be, and then I'm gonna talk about the individual components of it. So the first thing was the collaboration with Jain Library. So the Jain Library was, I actually wasn't part of Jain Library before. I got to know about Jain Library a few years back, and they have a vast amount of information about like Jain texts, and all of it is in the public domain. So I thought, like, why can't we take all this information and make it searchable? So I approached Jain Library and said, why can't we collaborate, and we can take all the books that we have currently on Jain Library, and let's make it in a searchable format, and let's OCR them. And that comes to the next step. So one of the biggest problems with Jain text in any old literature is that old literature is not necessarily in like typed format, right? You can't actually copy paste anything from it because it's all just an image. People just scan it, and they just scan it, and you can't actually, you just can't use it to search anything. So that comes to the second point. So I want to talk about that for a second. So OCR is optical character recognition, and I can explain that by this example. So let's say we have this page, right? There's no actual, you can't copy or paste anything from it because it's an image, right? But we can see down here that it actually takes the page and generates actual words from it. And that's basically what OCR is. It's a machine learning technique where it's a computer vision technique, which is part of machine learning, that essentially recognizes each letter based on the language and is able to assess and finally get readable text for like a human can actually read and actually search through. And what we had to do was we had to run OCR on thousands and thousands of pages. I think it's almost 500,000 pages. And that's actually not even the entire, that's actually only the tip of the iceberg. we don't have any, that's, I think, maybe like a few percent of the entire Jaini library catalog. So we're still working on it, but I'm happy to see that it's actually working and it's showing some results. So we have another example right here. Sometimes the pages actually have multiple languages on the same page, right? Which is very common in Jain text. So the ability to recognize that there's a Devanagari script and English, like Latin characters, in the same page is a very difficult task. You would have to run it. You would have to run OCR in many different languages and install many different language packs. And this page in particular is difficult because it doesn't even recognize it all the time. It recognized this word as 599, which is not correct. But sometimes it does recognize it correctly, like this. And we have so much more work to do, and this is just the beginning. So I just want to ask you guys a question in the chat. How long do you think it took to finish the OCR for this phase of the project? All right, okay, you guys are going very long, actually. A year, 6 months. Okay, so it's more okay, so it's more like 100 hours. So like initially, so actually the entire development of Jain Quantum was basically done within 1 month. I know that might be a little bit hard to believe, but our computing power now is pretty impressive now. So of course I had to rent like a huge machine on Google Cloud. And this machine had 16 processors and 64 gigabytes of RAM, but this was only for 3,000 books. And our catalog actually has 27,000 books. So we haven't done everything yet, but it definitely is working to some extent. And yeah, I mean, so in some sense, it could have taken much longer, but that's like the magic of computer science nowadays. If you do things more intelligently, you parallelize things, and you actually use the computing power that you have, you can actually accomplish tasks much quicker than you might expect. It very well could have been 1 year to actually do this, but by a little bit of thought and like thinking about this, we can actually get it down to like a very low time. So, oh yeah, I just want to actually bring up, so some of the OCR techniques I used, some of you might have heard of it. So currently I was using Tesseract OCR. Tesseract OCR, which is actually funded by Google now. I think Google owns it now. They maintain it. So you basically run this on your server and you would just give it an image and it would give out text. This was initially it was good, and it did work. And this took about 100 hours. But actually very recently, like as of last week, I actually reran. Maybe like a few weeks ago, I reran the OCR with the Google Cloud Vision API. And the Google Cloud Vision API I was just so impressed by it, because one of the problems with Tesseract and other OCR softwares is that it doesn't recognize multiple languages on the same page unless you pass in those languages manually. but we don't always know what language is on the page. So OCR is a very complicated field. If you want to do it on the, like, you're going to get very high quality results. So I ended up just using like the Google Cloud Vision API, which is also, you guys can also use it in Google Drive actually. If you open up any image as a Google Doc, you can actually get the OCR content of that image. And that's essentially using Google Cloud Vision API. Yeah, and for those of you who don't understand, who may not understand what I'm talking about, yeah, this portion of the talk was mainly technical in nature, but I'll try my best to make it very understandable for everyone to understand. So some search engine options that I had were Elasticsearch, Mealysearch, and PostgreSQL. So for those of you who don't know, probably the main search tool that companies use nowadays is Elasticsearch. It's a very memory heavy, takes up a lot of resources, and you have to configure a lot, and it's very complicated to get the results you want. It's not quick to develop with, but it's very powerful. So I actually wanted to explore other options. So one of the other options was PostgreSQL, which is you might know as a database, but it also does have a search engine built in, like a full text search capability within it. So that was one option, but there was some limitations and it wasn't very out of box, and you still had to do some work to make it configurable for the results I wanted in Jain Quantum. And finally, we come to Mealysearch. Mealysearch is a unique project. It's an open source project where essentially it's essentially a RESTful search API, and you basically just put in the data and you get out a searchable interface like this. And that's exactly what I wanted for Jain Quantum. Now, there are some limitations that I'm going to talk about later, and I'm actually currently working on transitioning off of this into something else, because the language support of this is not good for all languages, such as Hindi, Gujarati, and Sanskrit, and many other languages. So we needed this. This definitely works for English language text, and it does a very good job, and it's very fast. Which if you guys use Jain Quantum currently, that's exactly what's powering it. So the next step in this process was the UI and UX tooling. So basically, how did I get from this search engine, like all these search engine tools, to an actual final interface that people can actually use? So the process involved, if we go to the Jaini library website, we can see that there is a search functionality, but there's so many tools here. I mean, so many categories here. You can click on Hindi books, English books, right? So we have to essentially take all these classifications and all the books and the PDF files and run, as you saw, the massive OCR on all of them, and finally categorize them into a way that by like a page by page basis, and finally allow someone to actually search something and for results to actually come up. So it was a very long and arduous process, but thankfully it didn't actually take that long. because we can automate most of it through several tools that I'm going to talk about now. So, so Next.js, I'm not sure if you guys know about it, but some of you may have know about React.js. And Next.js is it's a layer on top of React.js. It's a React.js framework. And for those of you who don't know what React.js is, it's just a front-end tool to make like a user interface for people to use. Just for the modern browsers. And one of the interesting things about this is you can get a lot done in a very short amount of time. And it doesn't use too many resources. And I was able to finish the entire user interface maybe within about a few weeks, like 3 weeks. And it's a very very useful tools such as Next.js and React.js. And there's also Bootstrap, which is a design framework. It just makes things look good. So all the styling you see, that's just CSS and Bootstrap. So some goals and visions I have are the transition to multi-language support. So currently you can't really type anything in Hindi, Gujarati, basically no results come up. That's definitely not where we want to go, because most of the content is not actually in English. So we definitely need some functionality for that to work. And that's going to involve basically migrating the entire search engine to something else. The second thing was OCRing all of the 27,000 plus books on Jain library. It's a massive process. And as you saw, just for 3,000 books, it took 100 hours. So this will definitely be like many days, many weeks of work. And then the third thing was creating an automated pipeline. So essentially, imagine if someone could just put a book, they can just give us the book, and we can just automatically put it on the search engine without any manual intervention. And that's what the automated pipeline is. And it would be very, very efficient if we can do that, because that would essentially mean that we're not limited by any manual means. We can scale to as much as you want. And the fourth one, which is a very big stretch, but I would like to have a featured pages section and a knowledge graph. So essentially, for those of you who don't know what a knowledge graph is, if you type something on Google, like if you type Gandhi, you get there's like a whole tile here. Somehow Google knows that when I type Gandhi, I'm talking about the person. And Google also knows that it's related to these books, and it's related, these are similar people to him. Somehow Google knows all those interrelations. And that's essentially what a knowledge graph is. So the process of building a knowledge graph is extremely complicated. It's going to involve a lot of work, which is why it's a very big stretch. But imagine if we could do this for Jain Quantum. Like you literally type in Adinath, Rushabdev, and it would relate all the different every story, every fact, every place that was associated with Adinath. And that would definitely increase the functionality for people to search. And that's one of the most, it's one of the functionalities of a modern search engine, as you can see from Google, which millions of people use every day. And yeah, finally, the featured pages section, that's essentially just a place for people to see. Not everyone knows exactly what they want to search for. So sometimes people just want to see special content, pages that they don't really, they would never encounter normally. But sometimes, like, imagine if we could have some of these pages featured on a separate tab, and it would be automated, of course, and it would select some subset of the 500,000 pages on here and essentially make it displayable for them to see, and it would update every now and then. And that's some of the work that I've done with Jain Quantum. And I'm not sure if how much was understandable. I apologize if some of it was not understandable. But yeah, that was essentially the work I did for Jain Quantum. And if any of you have any questions, you're free to ask them.
Thank you very much for that super interesting and thought-provoking talk. Personally, I particularly liked how you talked about the Agams and also the idea of information symmetry within Jainism that we should develop. I feel like that's quite key in especially engaging sort of people my age or students. So yeah, now we'd like to open it up to the floor. So if you have any questions for Anish regarding Jain Quantum, we have a couple of questions in the chat as well. So I think we'll start with them. If I just get them up. So the first question we have is, how did you utilize the computing power of the Google Cloud platform that you rented?
Yeah, so I think like the main utilization of the computing power came from the power to essentially use multiple processors, like a huge amount of processors on Google Cloud. So OCR is a CPU intensive task mainly. So if you can have 16 processors, you can essentially OCR 16 books at a time. And that would greatly increase the speed that we can OCR everything. But the actual search engine doesn't use that much resources, but it does use a lot of RAM, which is also how we utilize Google Cloud and many other cloud platforms.
Okay, great. Another question we have is, can this technique be used to translate from one language to another? So say maybe from English to Gujarati or Gujarati to Hindi.
We could, so we can't do this right now with the current software that we have, but imagine if we use the Google Translate API or like any other translation tool, right? From there, we can actually take all the searchable text that we OCR'd out of the books and translate them into many different languages that people are most commonly searching for. So imagine if you took like a Hindi or Sanskrit book and translated it all to English, and then we like map those pages to the exact page of a Hindi of a Hindi or Sanskrit book, and that would open up many doors to searching many different languages.
Okay, yeah. Another one we have is, what determines the order of the results shown? So why is the first result the first result, and why is the last result, why did it end up at the bottom?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So currently, so I can just show you an example. For example, so let's say I type in Adinath, right? So the most, it would generally find the page that has the most frequency of the word Adinath. But imagine if I typed in Adinath birthplace or something, right? It would first find the closest proximity to these words. So these words are right next to each other. So therefore it would bring this up first. But in this case, the words are separated by some other words. And the words aren't actually exact. Like this Adinath has an A at the end. And this is births. So it would show those instances later on, and that like there's many other indexing rules that we like categorize and order things, but that's some of the main concepts.
Okay, great. Another more probably technical question is, does Jain Quantum use cloud computing to allow the service to be deployed at high speeds and for almost limitless storage capacity?
I wouldn't say it's definitely not limitless. There is limits, but yeah, it can go to limits if you use a special, like a different product, like the Google File Store, for example. That's essentially like a limitless storage system. But we don't. That would also require a lot more funding, which we don't think it's necessary right now. But it could go there.
Okay, yeah, great. Another one is, what search tool are you looking to transition to in the future?
Yeah, we will most likely transition to Believe Search, which is essentially it's a Golang tool. Golang, by the way, it's just a programming language by Google.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that's like a concurrency friendly language, but basically it's essentially like Elasticsearch, but it's just easier to use and not too much configuration. And I was able to get some prototypes that were working.
Okay, interesting. If anyone has any other further questions, just drop them in the chat, or feel free to unmute and ask Anish directly as well. We'll just give a few minutes if anyone has any last burning questions.
I had a quick question, Anish, which was, what kind of people do you find use the product the most? So yeah, like what is the most common use case of Jain Quantum?
Yeah, I think the most common, generally, it's actually used a lot in India. So that means like if I look at some of the Google Analytics, and it's actually being used more in India, like at like late hours of the night here. So that means like it's definitely used there. So I would say that it's mostly Jain scholars, researchers, professors, people who are very who really want to know like in depth and get like knowledge from the books. And it's also used by people like me and other like other people who just want to know anything about Jainism. They don't even have, they're not necessarily Jain at all.
Hopefully, Manoj, that answers your question. I think another maybe slightly different question is, so many of us, myself included, have the option to study abroad in our degree in like maybe the penultimate or final year. And I know you work in the US, in particular Boston. So how is it working in the US? And would you maybe recommend anyone to study in the US or study abroad?
Yeah, so like I've never actually gone abroad in terms of like studying, but yeah. I've like grown up in the US. So
okay,
basically like US universities. So I don't really have much to compare to, but yeah, US universities. I mean, education at some point is essentially the same most places, especially when it comes to computer science. But there are some like top institutions where you get a lot more exposure to like many new upcoming cutting edge things, like new research topics, things like that. And like working in the US, it's pretty much the same as working anywhere. It actually depends mostly on the company that you work for, and it's not not too different from many places.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. Does the name Quantum have any significance? Why Jain Quantum?
Yeah, so the name Quantum does not actually have any significance. I just chose it because it's the first thing that I was just like quantum computing and like a quantum leap, right? Some people say that it's like a quantum leap from the previous product. So in this sense, like since you could like have so much more functionality, I just thought Jain Quantum was a good name.
Sounds good. I guess another one is, so what would you say to students or people my age and around my age who want to know more about Jainism? Where should they start? Because I feel like a lot of people our age want to get into Jainism, or they are Jain but don't know much about it. Where should they start?
So there's many different ways to start. The first thing would be, like as I recommended before, I actually do like people learning Jainism from authentic sources like Tattva Sutra, but it may not be like the best starting point for if you're just getting into Jainism. So if you're just getting into Jainism, I would first really understand like the basic principles. Like as I said before, like I think like one of the most simple ways to express Jainism is it's just a path of nonviolence, right? That includes everything, because like nonviolence, if you're non-possessive, right, which is aparigraha, that's actually also just a form of nonviolence, because if you're not possessive, then you're not going to be violent in your means to get something to like live, right? And I think like the first thing would be just you can just first get a basic foundation of Jainism, and then you can dive deeper into reading the life stories of the Tirthankars, and many other people, like important people in Jainism. And yeah, you can just go from there. Maybe also read a lot of storybooks. As I think I showed in one of the OCR examples, that was like a comic strip almost. And I think that's like also a fun way to learn Jainism and other stories around it.
Yeah. Personally for you, how did you learn about Jainism? Was it more through experience or was it more through studying?
I would say it's actually both. So initially, like from a young age, it was more studying. I actually didn't like going to Batra at all. I was like a really bad student.
Okay.
Like yeah, I was just not a good student back then. But after that, like I sort of like, I think it's very important actually to get a good connection with other Jains, because if no one else around you is Jain, Jainism is not going to be like, you have nothing to relate to,
Yeah.
and you're most likely not going to maintain it throughout your life.
Yeah, sure.
But if you have people to relate to, then you're more likely to like follow and actually study and know more about it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. Another one is back onto Jane Quantum. How are your documents scanned? So all your books and your literature.
Oh yeah. So actually, that entire section is everyone else in Genial Library.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I can just talk about it a little bit. So I think they take the books. Most of the scanning is done in India. They basically it's like just like a lot of labor work. They would just take like massive piles of books and then just scan it page by page, and basically take an image of each page. I think like nowadays though, people are starting to actually give typed documents, so you don't have to like run OCR on them.
Yeah, I guess that would be a lot quicker as well.
Yeah.
Another thing is, do you have any ideas of adding a where to start page on the search engine? So someone's mentioned it's generally really hard to explain the religion to people who are completely unaware of it. So I think it kind of goes back to your the question I asked a couple of seconds ago on how to make Jainism more accessible for people who want to learn about the religion.
Wait, sorry, I didn't really understand. Wait, so
sorry, I'll just make that clear. Do you have any ideas of adding a where to start page on the search engine? So if you have no clue about Jainism, is there somewhere where you can start learning?
yeah, that would be a good idea actually. I think like the browse section of the if you like one of the like I think the second tab from the top is the browse page. I could add something there where like this is like the Jain introduction or something, and
yeah,
people can use it like that.
Yeah. Does anyone have any more questions? Feel free to unmute or add it in the chat.
Yeah,
But no, there were definitely some thought-provoking and interesting questions here.
I have a quick question, Anish. Thanks for your talk. I was just wondering, like, do you see any other areas of Jainism where technology can be applied? Like, do you see just other technology that you see around you in work and things which can be applied to Jainism?
Yeah, there's definitely like a lot of, I mean, basically every form of use of consumer technology can be applied to Jainism, as it applies to all people, such as mobile apps, like a Titi calendar, things like that. It could help you like maybe sunset time, sunrise time when you're fasting. There's just so many applications of it. I would also like to add that everything of that I'm talking about, it's not just about the technology. Like the technology is not important. It's just a tool for you to gain better consciousness of your entire existence, right? So it's don't focus too much on the technology. It's just a tool in your life. So yeah, there's many tools that we can use to get there, but like I just want to make sure that people don't forget what really matters.
If you don't mind, Anish, I have a question as well. So quite similar to what Kevin just asked, but just in general, so what kind of inspired you to bring the idea of technology as a tool to, technology as a tool to sort of educate people on something like religion or Jainism in particular? Like, what kind of inspired you to bring those two ideas together?
Yeah, I think what really inspired me was in the Young Jains of America group, which I'm part of, we actually started like a forum online on like, it's a Facebook group where people would post questions, and they would post anything they want, anything about life, and how it applies to Jainism. And from there, I realized that there are some people who are interested in learning more. They just aren't, they're just maybe intimidated. They just don't have access, or they just don't know. They just don't know like how much knowledge there is out there about Jainism. Because like when you go to Batra, right, your Jain knowledge may become contained within some like study book or something. I don't think they generally don't hand you the Tattvartha Sutra or anything like that in most Patras. So I think like going back to the sources and going back to the authentic literature, people can gain like a certain mode of it, knowledge that they wouldn't get like normally.
Okay, great. Thank you for that Q&A session, Anish. I think that answered most of our questions. Does anyone have any final questions that they would like to ask before we wrap up?
Go ahead, Dunn.
Chris,
go ahead.
Chris, go ahead. You go first, Chris.
Are you sure? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
I apologize. I came in late here. My name's Dr. Christopher Miller. I'm a professor of Jain Studies in Los Angeles, California. Danesh had shared the link with me, so I'm really excited that you had this event. And I just wanted to briefly mention that we're building an online YouTube channel right now, but hopefully a more robust platform for Jain Studies that will be open access and free through our university. So I just shared the link to the first playlist there so you can get a sense of what we're doing. But I'm really excited to also be I use Jain eLibrary sometimes, some of the other things that have been mentioned here. And we're hoping to just have one more additional open access free resource for people both within and outside of the Jain community who are interested in learning about Jain studies. So yeah, thank you for having this event.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Very quickly, Anish, nice to meet you. I dropped you a note probably a month or a couple of months ago when I saw this email when this when a platform was launched. I received it via Jain eLibrary. I'm based in Switzerland. Formerly, I worked with Swiss banks and many other technology companies heading their large global platforms, digital platforms and whatnot. And then now I'm turning into an entrepreneur myself. running 2 startups of my own. I also help a lot of startups in this region in Switzerland with their technology platform strategy, also mentoring them, particularly the ones which are creating platforms for doing good in the society with ethical or impact-oriented or sustainability-oriented backgrounds. And it would be great to kind of share my expertise with your vision and help and contribute in any which ways I could help you with my background in that area.
Okay, I'll definitely follow up
Mhm.
if we have a initiative that we're working on. Currently, we're just trying to get this out in like the phase 2 of the project. So
yeah. Fantastic. Congratulations.
thank you.
Anish, I have another quick question. Do you know of any other search engines that exist for like other religious texts, like I know Hinduism or anything, or is this like something you've just come up with on your own?
Other search engines for other, I think, so yeah, there definitely is for, actually there actually is for Jainism also, like Jainpedia and many other things, but there, I think like, I mean, there's many different definitions of what a search engine could be, right? Not all of it is very like interactive or as user friendly. So like my main focus was, I'm not really aware of any Hindu search engine, but we could also make like a hinduqq.org or something. I mean, we have basically the entire infrastructure to do it, so we could do that.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, should we start? Kevly, I think you're muted. There you go.
Great, thanks. Yes, I think unless if there are any other last minute questions, I think it's coming to the end of our time. And just from both Cambridge and Imperial, we really want to say thank you so much, Anish. I think it's just a really relevant talk for all of us students. You know, we're looking into these technology fields, and it's really inspiring how using technical background, you've applied it to Jainism and kind of taking it forward into the next like the next phase of Jainism to make it accessible to everyone. So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, we thank you and we really enjoyed this talk. And please look at the chat function. I think we'll be sharing all our social medias and the Jain Quantum website on the chat function. So we'd really appreciate it if you follow our pages and yeah, join all our other future events. We, Cambridge University personally, we have an event coming up next weekend or the following weekend with Huglet's Animal Sanctuary. So it's like these 2 people who have set up an animal sanctuary in Essex, and they are not Jain themselves, but they follow the Jain way of life and in saving animals. So that should be a really great talk. And I'll hand over back to Jinal, who will quickly say any events that Imperial are doing.
Yeah, thank you for that. So as Kevly said, our socials are now in the chat, so please do follow our Instagram and Facebook to keep updated with all our events and collaborations that we have planned for the upcoming term. So just keep an eye on our socials and everything will be posted there. But just once again, on behalf of Imperial would like to say thank you to coming to our event. Thank you to Anish for speaking. It was a super interesting and informative talk. Yeah, so I think that concludes it. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a nice evening. Bye.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you.